Wow. This is why we do it live, gentlemen. We do it live. Let me start over. I was muted. So, welcome to the Bungalows for Bachelors live stream. Man, that was really smooth the first time. I don't know if I can do it again. We got Tam in the chat. Welcome, Tam. I hope you're here to learn because you're going to be learning. So, we're going to be traveling through space and time. That was my arm motion. We're going to be checking things out and going through some portals today. So, um, shout out to Green Observer for making sure that I've got audio live. So, who knows how long I would have gone. And I swear, before I launched it, I looked at it and I was like, listen, you're muted. Make sure you unmute yourself because that would be bad if you didn't. And here we are. So, portals. Okay, before we get into portals. If you don't know what Bungalows for Bachelors is, basically I've got a school server. I got a community. If you want to join, learn about construction, learn how to make money with construction, learn about framing, learn about home building, you name it. I got a bunch of stuff going on there. Check it out. Link is in the description and you can join our community. If you want some free stuff, then just watch the YouTube channel. You're here now. Subscribe, like the damn video. Thanks, guys. And yeah, let's get right into it. So, portals. What is a portal? Well, a portal in the video game is where you go like through one bubble and you come out another bubble, and that's cool, but that's not what we're talking about today. Unfortunately, what we're talking about today has to do with lateral bracing, which I know is y'all's favorite topic. Every time I bring it up, whether it's diaphragms, wind, earthquakes, you name it, we want our houses to stay standing. So, lateral bracing. Why do we have lateral bracing in a house? Well, we have the lateral bracing in a house because, like I said, wind and earthquakes. We don't want our houses to get pushed over. If you've ever seen a video of a house getting pushed over, it's kind of scary because, like, you can imagine it's basically like being inside a giant scissor. You get smushed. So we don't want that. And basically what we do is in the areas where we get high winds, we design the wind to not push our houses over because wind generates large pressure forces on the sides of our building. And in areas with earthquakes, we design our buildings to not get shaken side to side. And the actual mass of the house is what makes the house want to move back and forth. Like if I take this pen and I move back and forth real quick, it's pretty light and it's no big deal. But if this pen was like 3 feet long and weighed 200 pounds and I did this, it would be much more harder and it'd do lots of wiggly things and it'd look kind of funny. So earthquakes, that's a problem. Both of these things put lateral forces on our house. Lateral meaning if we're looking top down onto something and this is our house, it's trying to move around on the earth laterally, sideways, either north, south, east, west. That is a lateral motion, right? So when we protect our houses from lateral forces, that strength comes from our walls. Usually not really our interior walls. Those are not super, helpful. But most of the exterior walls of your house have probably structural sheathing panels on them. And depending on if you're in a crazy earthquake zone, you might have more than that. You might have some crazy details and hardware. But that's the shell of the house is generally what's keeping us from getting knocked over. So knowing that lateral system is keeping us from getting racked around, how do portals relate to that? Well, we need a portal frame when we need a certain amount of bracing in a wall, right? So if we have a box and the box is our house, we're just going to make a box house because box houses are easy. And something's trying to push the house this direction, whether it's an earthquake or wind, then what's happening is the walls parallel to that direction are doing a bunch of work to keep that house from racking that direction. So typically, if you've got a nice clean section of wall, no windows, no doors, you're just going to have a bunch of sheathing panels put on there, one in the corner, you're just going to go all the way down, really. And you're just going to nail it all on 6 inches on the edges, 12 inches in the field, in the center of the panel, depending on where you are. And that's going to provide a whole bunch of rigidity in that wall and it's going to prevent this thing from getting racked. If you are someone who perhaps got, like, for example, a big glass patio door for free or a really good price, either way, and you're going to put that thing in your house and that thing is going to take up, this much of your wall, and all you're left with is this little itty bitty piece on this side and this little itty bitty piece on this side. You basically don't have any wall left there, and your door is not going to contribute much strength to your house. Let's be honest. Um, so what we do is we can create a portal because we've got these skinny little pieces of wall. And if we were to just do the regular nailing on those little pieces, we wouldn't have enough strength in that piece of wall in order for this to work, which is why we've created the portal frame. So, types of portal frames. Let's get into the nitty gritty now here. So, there's generally 3 types listed in the International Residential Code. There's a PFH, a PFG, and a CSPF. Okay. So PF, believe it or not, stands for portal frame. The PFH is basically, well, here's the concept of the portal. This is what the portal is, right? We're going to look at a wall from the front, right? Now we're looking at the front wall. So we're going to have some wall. It's got some doorway and little bitty bitty pieces of wall left on each side. So what we want to do is we ideally would just take sheathing panel and make sure that we've got this full chunk on both sides, sheathed full height. And if that's enough length that we need for the wall, then we're good to go. But if it's too skinny, we're not good to go, and we got to do something a little bit different. So that's where the portal comes in. The portal is going to do something magical with your header. Okay, so above every door or doorway, assuming you are doing regular framing and you're not doing super cool, advanced, super duper headers, which if you want to learn how to do, you could check it out on my most recent short, or go check out at Rauckfam, Rauckfam on Instagram, because they love to do those structural sheathing box headers. And you can't do a portal frame with a structural sheathing box header. That wouldn't work. So they can't be combined. But if you've got a regular header, and let's say it's a big opening, and let's say it's just happens to be 2 2x12s that you've taken, sandwiched them together with a little bit of shimmy shim in between, and you put them above your door, then all of the weight, the header is there because there's a bunch of weight coming down the wall. And if you want to make an opening in the wall, you've got to displace that weight, push that weight somewhere else. So the weight is pushed out to the side where it's loaded by the jacks on both sides of the header. That takes the weight. Everyone's happy. Now, that's a regular header. If you want to build a portal frame, then basically all you do is you extend that header some quantifiable distance, right? As noted in the tables that I'm going to reference here in just a second from the IRC, you figure out what you need, you extend that amount of header, and yes, your header is actually longer than your opening, and it will extend past the end of your doorway. And then what happens is there's a little piece of, green, perfect. There's a piece of sheathing that's going to extend from top plate to bottom plate. It's going to overlap that header. And where they overlap, you're going to do a bunch of nailing, 3 inches on center grid, a whole bunch of little nails. Okay. And we're going to break down why that works. That's the portal. And you would maybe have another one on the other side as well if you wanted to gain that strength. So that's the portal. The basic 3 types, right? The CSPF, the PFH, and the PFG. Well, basically the CSPF and the PFG are very similar. PFG basically means portal frame garage. It's intended to be the portal frame for a garage. Typically, this happens for the garage door in a house. You won't see it many other places. Maybe you'll see it for a living room, massive patio door. But again, it's not as important there because you've probably got more wall on that side of your house to do stuff with than just the garage. Typically, the garage is just a little piece of thing sticking out. So the PFG for the garage. The PFH is a portal frame with hold downs. Hold downs. What are those? Well, hold downs. I need blue, but blue is probably somewhere far away. Yeah, it's way over there. Mr. Pumpkin was playing with it. I'm done for. Okay, hold downs. You can either use straps or you can use like actual hold down bolt anchors. Either way, it needs to be, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure 3,500 pounds of uplift resistance. AKA, if you were to try to pull that thing out of the concrete, it can resist 3,500 pounds on both sides of this panel. Because what happens is when the wind is pushing this wall, and it's trying to rack, this thing's trying to rotate. And if this thing can't rotate because there's a hold down holding that corner down, then you get your strength from that. So that's why we put one on both sides of the panel and both sides of the opening if we can. So that's the PFH. It's like the big dog. If you want to have a real pain in the butt time installing these wet set straps or trying to get hold downs in just the right location when you're pouring a foundation, then go for the PFH because it's a strong sucker, right? Generally, the easy one that most people are going to want to do is the CSPF. And that's because it is pretty cookie cutter, right? We're going to have a wall. I'm going to draw only one side of the opening for clarity here. Okay, wall, header's going to extend. Sheathing panel is going to overlap. Bunch of nails. Everyone's happy. And at the bottom, it basically just wants you to put 2 regular old J anchor bolts in the bottom plate. And the panel just gets nailed to that bottom plate a whole bunch, right? That nailing is the thing keeping the panel from rocking. Okay. So sometimes you might run across a house built where it's like typically you only need one sole plate at the bottom of the wall, right? To keep the wood off the concrete. But rarely, occasionally, you might actually see somebody stacking sole plates right here. Like there may be like 3 or 4 or 5, and you're like, why are they stacking so many sole plates? What's they don't need that, right? Well, they're doing it because they need to increase the moment resistance, the moment strength down here at this joint because there's not enough. Like it's good enough for that to be strong, but if you can't resist that with enough the nails in sole plate down here, and that's squeezed to the foundation with these big long anchor bolts, right? If you don't develop enough strength there, it doesn't do you any good. So occasionally you'll see that stacked. But the CSPF is nice because it's basically just a panel you put on and nail to an extended header. There's no extra fancy hardware. You can put your hold downs in like normal, not the hold downs. You put your anchor bolts in kind of like normal. It's just cheaper, easier way to go. You don't got to mess with trying to wet set those straps. Now, what's the trade-off? There's got to be a trade-off. If you look at, first of all, construction methods, if you want to see all of the ways that we typically will beef up our walls for lateral bracing, they list them all here in R602-10-4 in the 2021 International Residential Code. If you go to the internet and just Google that, you can look at it and read it. You can't print it or anything, but you can always do that. Super free. It's free. Okay, so you go look up some construction methods if you're curious. But specifically, table R602-10-5 references the minimum, or it references like the minimum length requirements or like contributing length requirements of panels, right? So if I've got, here's an example of a minimum length requirement. So if I want to, forgetting the portals, if I've got a wall and I've got a window in the wall, here's my window. There goes the headset. Likes to do that every time I go live. And I put a panel right there. There's some minimum width that panel has to be as a factor of my ceiling height and a factor of the height of that window. And it's all in the table, that table right there. You just look it up. Now, the same holds true for portals. If you're trying to like look at your plan, your architectural plan, and it's done, and you want to know if your portals are going to work and like can contribute to the length of the braced wall line strength that you need, right? It's all about finding like getting sufficient strength in that wall line. Then what you're going to want to check is basically, typically you're going to have something like this. You're going to have a really skinny piece of wall because somebody somewhere thought it'd be a good idea to remove all the wall and put glass and windows and all this beautiful stuff. Okay, so let's say that this was 20 inches of wall, right? And it's the same on the other side. What you're going to want to know is you want to know if I make a portal and I'm using CSPF, is 20 inches enough? Can I extend my header that 20 inches? Does it give me enough strength? Can I even make it work? And if you check the table, it usually probably would work out with something like 20 inches. Now, if the house has already been designed and this size is fixed, and let's say it's fixed at 16 inches, And in order for you to make a portal here, and the portal, by the way, the portal here is a factor of this header height and like a few other things, like what's the seismic design category if you're using like the CSPF, and then it's like a factor of the something else if you're using the PFH. But basically, um, you got to know this header height, and that will tell you the taller the door, the wider that panel needs to be, because the taller the door means there's more racking being concentrated into the portal. So, and it also means there's less sheathing above the door, generally speaking. So if that's 16 inches, but my CSPF table tells me that I needed 20 inches for to do a portal based on that door height, then either I change the door height and make it work, make it like some number that I could do, or if I'm stuck with the door size and I'm stuck with this wall dimension and I only have 16 inches, well, guess what? You're going to be using the portal frame for hold downs, the PFH, because that one works pretty good at 16 inches, generally speaking. And that's just the way it's going to have to go. And so if you lock yourself into these sizes and commitments and everything, but you've only got that much space, then guess what? You're going to be figuring out a way to strap down 3,500 pounds on both sides of that panel, on both sides of the wall, right? So got to pay attention to that minimum size. So that takes care of the like table and the minimums and stuff. And so those are the types, right? You're going to want to use the CSPF most of the time because it's easy. But if you don't have enough wall space, maybe you've got to upgrade to the PFH and, do crazy stuff. So how does a portal frame function? Well, here's the fun part here at Bungalows for Bachelors. We're going to get into the science. We're going to get into the nerd stuff. And here we go. Okay, so header to sheathing connection. Your header is extended. Your sheathing overlaps it. And there's a nailing pattern. Okay. So first we got to think about what's happening here at this intersection. So what's happening is this wall is trying to rack. So imagine the top plate's up here, bottom plate's down here. The bottom plate can't move because it's attached to the foundation. Top plate is getting pushed left or pulled right or whatever is happening, right? That's the racking action that's trying to happen. So when that happens, what that's doing is that's trying to induce a moment or a twisting action into all of the members in the wall. So if we were to imagine this joint and we were to put one screw in the middle of the joint right here, we would contribute 0 moment strength capacity to this joint because it would rotate about that hinge. It's just a hinge now. Everything could just fall over. There's no strength. So what the nailing pattern does is the nailing pattern allows you to generate a whole bunch of little tiny moment arms, right? And what's a moment arm? The moment arm is the thing that resists it, right? So if I have a nut on a car that's a nut. Looks more like a tooth, but that's a nut. Okay, that's a nut on a car. And I've got my wrench and I'm trying to turn the nut. I'm going to apply a force to the end of this wrench, some distance away from the center of that wrench, perpendicular to my force. That's a moment. Okay. 10, let's say, pounds of pushing, and let's say 10 inches of wrench gives us 10 foot-pounds or inch-pounds. Sorry, inch-pounds, because that was in inches, right? That's a torque. That's like a moment. Resistance is the same thing as like torques, right? So what's happening is if that's our wrench, every little nail is acting as a resistance to twisting about this point right here. So there's a nail going through the sheathing and into the beam. Some specified shear strength between that connection is going to resist some distance from the center of rotation, right? And it's true for every single one of these little nails. And when you put them all together, then that's what's going on. Every nail is going to, obviously the ones closer to the center are going to contribute less, which is why the bigger this area gets, the stronger you can make the connection, because you can get a bunch of nails really far away from that theoretical center of rotation. Okay. So that is how that works. And the connection is true. This connection is true at the bottom of that sheathing panel. Remember I said sometimes you need multiple sills. Same thing is true there. If I were to draw that real quick. Okay. Bottom sill sheathing panel. It's a little bit different here. Because you got to imagine the theoretical rotation point. Theoretical rotation point is actually on this side. If panel rotates, panel goes like this. Okay. Theoretically. So what happens is for every little, nothing ever like works perfectly like this because stuff's going to break and shift and bend and move weird. But like theorizing things, calculating reasons, we could assume that either this panel is going to hit the concrete and want to rotate about that point, or it's going to want to rotate on this last nail. Maybe that's what's going to want to do. In that case, if we're trying to calculate the strength of this thing, we would say, well, how much shear strength does this nail get in the sheathing to wood? How far away is it from that point? That's a moment resistance. And the same is true for this one and this one and this one. They're all contributing to that thing not getting pulled out of the wood. Now, what happens if you get too much pushing and not enough nails? Basically, your sheathing panel is going to shred. It's going to rip these nails out of the bottom of the sheet, and that's a problem. Don't want that. So that's how the portal frame functions. Now, in order to successfully achieve the portal frame and travel world to world, you must pay attention to some details, because there are some details when doing portals that if you do them wrong, your house might actually blow over in a tornado, right? So the first thing, let's talk about the opposite strap up here. I wrote it down because it's important. So the opposite strap is a detail saying in your wall, here's my header, here's my overlapping sheathing, here's the bottom of my wall. What it's saying is when you technically frame this, you can't have the stud go through the header, right? So your header is actually continuous and your studs stop underneath here. And you're actually usually going to have two studs, and then you'll have two more studs. Wow, come on, Black. You'll have two more studs over here, and then you'll have like some other little studs up here that are like part of the little pony wall that sits on top of this whole header, right? So because you had to extend this header into the wall, what you've done, especially if it's a skinny wall like this, and you've like all you had was the 16 or 20 inches on the end of the wall, what you just did is you just took the bending capacity out of the wall and like totally removed anything you had, right? So what is the bending capacity, right? So if we take a cross section of a wall and that's its stud, and the wind's blowing on the wall trying to push it into the building, the stud's going to want to bow inward, right? That's the bending resistance we're trying to resist with the wind pressure pushing on the wall. Well, if we have a regular header that stops here, then we actually had a full stud. I'm going to mess this up with more color. We actually had full height studs here and here. So there was like some more resistance. The full height studs are what create that resistance, because you need to go from the top plate all the way to the bottom plate in order to get that strength. So because we lost that, because we broke the stud, there is a detail specifying that where you do this on the inside of the wall, take a strap like an LSTA 36 or something from Simpson Strong Tie. It's going to strap from the top cripple. Come on, marker. Top cripple over the beam down to the bottom cripple, and you're going to nail it on. And why is that strap important? Well, let's analyze the joints here. That strap, and it goes on both sides of the opening on the inside of the house, not on the sheathing side, because the sheathing is on there. It's already doing its job. It's already doing the same thing. It's acting as a strap. So if we look at a cross section of this portal, we're going to have some kind of top plate and probably another top plate, because single top plates are a pain, remember? You're going to have a cripple, and it's going to probably go down and it's going to hit the header, which is going to be some plies of like materials and stuff, right? There's the header. And then there's going to be the studs below it. And I'm taking this cross section like into the portal where it was broken, right? So if the wind pushes on this, you have two hinge points. You have a hinge right here and you have a hinge right here. So worst case scenario, this thing is going to hinge and hinge, right? It's going to just going to fold in right there at that spot because there's no strength. But in order for this to fold in like this, remember, this whole thing turned sideways is basically like just a beam, right? You've got a support, and a beam in the middle. And if it's bowing down, the bottom of the beam or that side of this wall is in tension. It's being stretched, but it can't be stretched if you take a metal strap and you strap that side down before the wall bends on this side, right? If you strap that across, now all the nails are keeping this piece of wood in tension connection with this piece of wood, assuming you put the nails in nice and tight and everything's happy, right? So when the wall pushes on this new piece of metal is acting like a surgical implant into the wood. So like if the wind were to push this way and the wood was continuous, it's just wood fiber on the exterior doing its work. But if it were to push this way, now you've got a metal strap doing the work. It's like surgery. It's like getting a titanium plate put in your body. It's pretty cool, right? So welcome to the chat, Mr. Will Stevenson. I hope you are enjoying this discussion about portals because I am. So, opposite strap, you got to do that detail because otherwise you might have a whole bunch of sheetrock cracking problems and nobody likes a big crack. So, all right, that's the opposite strap. Plies and shim. All right, here's the other special thing, right? So there's a specific note when you're doing the portal. Let's go back to this cross section, okay? So we had top plate of the wall, cripple stud, and we've got our beam part. If you are doing a header where you've built the header out of like, let's say the header is one fat glulam beam, it don't matter. The whole thing's solid wood, you're fine. But if you're making the header out of, let's say, a 2-ply LVL, which means you are 2 plies, means you're just taking 2 of them. You're putting them together, gluing them, nailing them, maybe not gluing them, but you're nailing them, screwing them together, right? You're taking 2 individual things, you are making them into one member. If it's LVL, it don't matter because if that's a 3.5-inch wall, you put 2 LVLs together, you get 3.5 inches of thickness. There's no shim, don't matter. But if you're using commodity lumber and you are going to put 2 2x12s together with a 1/2-inch shim of plywood or OSB, typically that just goes in between them because that's just the way it goes. Like when you're framing, you want like good solid lumber on both sides. But when you're doing a portal, you have to put the shim on the back side because here's the reason. All right. That's not big enough. Let's blow this up. Let's get real big here. Okay. So this is the top plate. Little cripple. Here's the beam ply. Here's the first ply cross section. There's the X for the cross section of the 2x12. You want to put the next one right up against it. This is not to scale, clearly. And then you've got a 1/2 inch left. So you just take that 1/2 inch shim, and the 1/2 inch shim goes on the back side of the wall and goes there. Now, why is that important? Why did we not put the shim in between the two? That's because of what we're trying to do with the portal. Remember, there's a piece of sheathing going on the top of this thing that's super important where it gets nailed to this header. Remember that overlap cross section with the 3-inch on sale, 3-inch on sale, on center grid pattern of nailing? Those nails are little heads and they're going like this. And in order to develop the quantifiable amount of strength that we need, these nails need to be in solid lumber. We need to know what they are in, right? So if there's a shim in here, what's going to happen? The nail's going to enter the shim material. In all reality, it's going to be probably just as strong. But in case there was like a gap between shims or some defect in the shim or defect in the OSB or a bubble or whatever, like we just don't know, not quantifiable. So that's why we move that over. Now you know. Hold downs. Of course, if you're going to end up using the PFH and you need the hold down straps or anchors on that panel, make sure you put them in the right spot. They're very difficult to get in just the right spot. And again, adding hardware makes finishing things flat and smoothly and nicely a pain in the butt. But hey, you got to do it if you got to do it. So watch out for that. Again, the extra sills, that is if you, usually you're not going to do this. If you really want to do it and feel cool and strong, go for it. But it'll be because you saw some engineer specified on your plans or something. But if the bottom of that panel requires multiple sills, make sure you put them in there and they all get bolted and clamped. Make sure if you know it's got extra sills that you bought an extra long anchor bolt, because if the anchor bolt only goes to here and clamps one, guess what? It's not going to do very good. So make sure you get all those. Now, 1.5 times length. This matters for the part where you're like actually figuring out what the length needs to be when you're doing your like calculations. So if I'm doing my charts and I'm planning this out and I say this is brace wall line A, right? And the code says that because these two brace wall lines are 20 feet apart, I'm required to have at least, I'll just make up a number, 6 feet of bracing in this wall of CSPF, not CSPF, that's portal frame, of just CSWSP, continuous sheathing wood structural panel, aka OSB, plywood. It's just a 4-foot sheet. You just nail it on. Cool, good to go. It's saying I need 6 feet of that. So if I take a 4-foot sheet, put it on this corner, I got 4 feet. If I take a 4-foot sheet, put it on that corner, I got 4 feet. So I'm at 8 feet. I'm already over my minimum requirement of 6. I'm good to go. And I know that I'm going to sheet the rest of the wall too. So I've just got plenty. I know I'm good. Now, if I'm doing portals and I'm like, need to get that 6, that 6 feet, okay? Let's say, let me just mental math. Yeah, mental math's not gonna happen fast enough. But basically, if I got a 4-foot panel here and there's some door here, and I'm gonna do a one-sided portal, which you can do. Maybe you just only do one side of the opening. You don't have to do the other side if there's no room. Okay. But you just don't get to count the sheathing on the other side, right? And I've got this little like 2-foot thing. Well, let's say here we go. This will work out. Math will work out. Okay. 3 foot of panel I can fit over here. I need 6 feet in brace wall line A, but 2 foot of it is a portal because the 2 foot's the panel size, and then the rest of this is just part of the thing because it's part of the portal, right? So what the 1.5 times length rule is if you go to this table R602.10.5 and you look up these numbers, it tells you, hey, by the way, when you're in seismic categories A, B, and C, then you can take that number, multiply it by 1.5, and that's the amount of strength length that you get to count in your braced wall line. So the way the math would work is this is a, thing in seismic category A. I get to count this number at 1.5. So this means this is 2 feet wide. 2 feet times 1.5 would become 3 feet. I get to count 3 linear feet towards the strength I need in my wall. 3 feet plus the 3 feet means 6 feet. I've got my strength, even though I don't actually have 6 feet of structural sheathing along the length of my wall. I've got a portal. It allows me to do this cool trick. Now, if you're in crazy earthquake zones, you actually don't get the 1.5 rule. It's just a 1-to-1. So got to watch out for that. But that's the special rule. That's what happens when you're taking out the brace wall lines. If this stuff is confusing you, you can join the school server and you can learn because somebody created a fantastic framing design program where you can learn how awesome it is to do shear designs in the framing design program. And just go check it out. Links in the description, guys. There's nothing stopping you. So 1.5 times length. Nailing, of course. Nail the sheet on correctly. Look at the detail. Pretty sure the detail just says 3 inches on center everywhere. Plus a 3-inch grid on the header. It's pretty simple. Just go check the code. It's in the code, you guys. That's the nailing. Header extensions. You would not believe how many times as a structural inspecting framing engineer, you would go to a job site where it says, this is your house. You got a portal going on right here. And there's a portal frame CSPF clearly labeled right here. And it says, hey, by the way, this 20 inches is part of the portal. We do so much stuff on a plan to detail it to make it obvious that that's a portal. We call it, we point to it, and we say, portal, look, it's a portal. Put a big bubble around it. Portal, do the thing here. Special detail here. Here's the detail, portal, special, do the thing, right? And you go to the job site and you look at the wall and the header looks like this. Y'all can see that, right? Can you tell me, is there a problem with that header if it was supposed to be a portal? Is there a problem? Do you know what the problem is? The problem is that header probably cost them, because it was a big 16-foot wide patio door. It probably cost them a good $200 or $300 because those are LVLs or a glue lamp or something. And, you can't just glue on 20 inches of LVL to the end of this thing and have it work. The problem is that that's not there. Do you know how much work it would be, especially if there's a roof on this thing or ceiling and you're inspecting at the end of the framing? Eek, right? So what do? You typically just like look at it and you're like, well, it's not there. I hope the house doesn't fall down. Pass fail, maybe. You just make a judgment call as an engineer that like, okay, maybe there's enough stuff over here that it's fine. You just do mental math and make a call, right? People really don't like getting failed when they're this far into something like this, because you'd have to hold up the roof and the ceiling. You'd have to tear this wall out. You'd have to buy a new LVL. You'd have to rebuild this. And there's like some politics involved in inspections as an engineer that you don't really want to like screw over the builder that's giving you a bunch of work. So you got to like balance the what's actually acceptable, what's not acceptable. This is actually a problem. So if you're building in Texas, the wind's probably not going to knock over your house unless you're at the coast. So that said, watch out for those header extensions. And that's all I got for you, folks. I hope this was educational. I hope you took a journey through the portals in time, the blue and the orange. You transferred worlds. You learned about these special magnificent headers that are made of wood, and that's what makes them magnetic. Quick shout out to the guys and gals in the chat. We got on YouTube, we've got Green Observer, we got Tam, and we got Will Stevenson. Appreciate you guys showing up. Looks like we had some people join over on the Instagram side. Appreciate all of you showing up, all of you checking things out. Love having you here. I love teaching stuff. Please go check out the school server. Working on some things in the background. Got some cool stuff coming, some cool projects, some good opportunities. Green Observer says, I like green portals. I bet you do, Green Observer. We got, Dace. Hello, Dace. We got Dace in the chat. When do we get out the obsidian and the crystals? I've got crystals, sir, but those are my Brazilian power ones, and I don't want to put those on the air because I don't want all the people to try to take them away. But appreciate it, Dace. Thanks for checking things out. Thank you, everybody, for being in the chat. Thank you for the support. Like and comment, subscribe, belly buttons and everything. And I will, let's see. Yeah, that's about it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.